Last week, 45 Senate Democrats voted down the creation of an oversight office that would audit U.S. assistance to Ukraine. Here's journalist Glenn Greenwald breaking down the vote. Let's watch.
There were 51 yes votes and 48 no votes. And because the Democrats invoked the Jim Crow racist filibuster, as they call it, 60 votes were needed for passage. They only got 51 votes, which is a majority of the senators, but that was 9 votes short needed for passage. So the Democrats not only voted no, but they invoked a filibuster to ensure there was no actual vote on this amendment. That's how badly they wanted to ensure that there was no oversight on the hundreds of billions of dollars they're going to end up spending in Ukraine. They've already spent $113 billion.
Independent journalist Michael Tracy called out progressives for their continued support of U.S. intervention in the war in Ukraine. Quote, "It'd be fascinating to hear the likes of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, John Fetterman, etc. try to explain why they're so adamantly against establishing a lead inspector general to oversee Ukraine spending. Their answer would probably be something like goo goo gaga Putin." Very interesting comment.
It is a fascinating question, indeed. And I looked around a little bit, and I haven't seen any journalists who've tried to get them on the record or been able to get them on the record so far explaining their vote.
The journalists are probably relieved that they voted that way.
Because they're all on the same page.
Yeah.
They're all, I mean, to that point, journalist Caitlin Johnstone, who is a very principled anti-war journalist, recently did a kind of Twitter article about how we talk about media literacy in terms of left versus right bias, but very infrequently is there a discussion about how there is so much of a consensus on the issue of wars and foreign policy among all of the media institutions that we have, and how all those left-right analyses kind of break down when you throw the question of how you approach foreign interventionism into the equation. All of those neat charts get skewed because there are people on the right who are kind of anti-war. There are people on the left who it gets very jumbled and disorganized. But this is an example of why that it becomes a problem. Because while we do know that I believe Rand Paul voted no voted no because he preferred his own version of the bill.
He has his own bill to do this auditing that he thinks is stronger, which actually probably goes to show that this, which couldn't, not even this could pass, probably wasn't. If Rand Paul thinks he had a stronger version, probably this was
as good as it was going to get.
Yeah.
And so I think that's some squishy rationale, but at least it's a rationale that we can discuss. What does someone like Bernie Sanders, who has been so consistently anti-war, he's advanced this Yemen World Powers Resolution, he has done so much on this front, including on a bipartisan basis, being willing to partner with people like Hawley on issues pertaining to war. Mm-hmm. What is the reason for not supporting this kind of bill? Senator Warren, any number of people who identify as progressive.
Elizabeth Warren had less of a articulated and well thought out, I thought, commitment to non-interventionism.
I certainly agree there.
John Fetterman, I don't know what he thinks about it. I can't understand.
But if the media is not ever even interested in making them come to the mat and justify their explanation at the same time that they're holding themselves out as progressives, what mechanism is there to hold them accountable?
It's like you said, on these issues, there's a presumption that they would support the war effort. It's unthinkable not to do so. That's the media's approach, not just for this intervention, but for every intervention. That it's unthinkable that you wouldn't support endless funding, troops if it comes to that. They speak with, the mainstream media speaks with one voice on foreign policy. It speaks from a neoconservative position, a position that used to be ascendant in the Republican Party and also somewhat ascendant to the Democratic Party, and now is not popular among conservative voters. It's never been popular. That's clearer to Republican leadership now, although there's still some grappling with the fact that a lot of Republicans quietly support still doing neoconservatism, but they know that the base does not support it, and they have to at least signal their opposition to it. And some of them do have genuine opposition to it. The Democratic Party, we're a year past this now, but the shameful walking back of that little piddly letter to think about maybe being less involved in Ukraine really showed where the Democrats are at.
Yeah, I mean, only 2 Democrats voted in favor of this, John Ossoff and John Tester.
Which is interesting.
It's not clear what's motivating those choices, but I would say not to read too far into any of these votes because, as Glenn Greenwald pointed out, they need 60 votes to overcome the filibuster. So on both sides, you could have some, for the reasons that you just described, with the Republicans understanding that being pro-war is not popular right now, you could have some performative votes in favor of this Ukraine oversight position from Republicans who just don't want the bother of justifying their no vote,
right.
Knowing that it wasn't going to pass because they didn't get to 60. And the same way that
hawkish Republicans can vote for this, knowing it's not going to.
Exactly. So this is.
We want to actually look at where the spending's going.
Right. And to that point, like, I think Glenn, he's being a little tongue-in-cheek there, describing it as the Jim Crow filibuster. But what he's doing
that's how the Democrats
That's how the Democrats.
Yeah.
The Democrats, when it's a filibuster that blocks something that they want, pound their chest and make a big deal about how, we wanted good things and the Republicans wouldn't stop us. At the same time, they refuse to get rid of the filibuster. And when there's a conversation about actually ending the filibuster,
they needed
like
to
Joe
stop
Biden,
us from auditing their Ukraine war funding.
The filibuster is the greatest preserver of the status quo on so many of these pro-corporate duopoly issues.
Sure.
And I think that is why we see people like Joe Biden so reluctant to criticize the filibuster, even when they will performatively describe it as a Jim Crow filibuster, a filibuster that preserves a lot of kind of negative, regressive legacy laws when it's beneficial to them. And the Democrats love to hide behind the figment of there being some procedural bar to them doing a good thing. And there's no better procedural bar, like these invisible handcuffs that the Democratic Party like to wield to defend themselves against actually effectuating any of their policies, than the filibuster.
Yeah, you and I have different policy agendas, obviously, so I like the filibuster better than you do because it thwarts, as you said, it enhances the status quo, and a lot of things I don't want the government to do more, so I'm okay with the status quo. But on foreign policy, there is so much unanimity of thought, there's so much bipartisan agreement that they can do big, bold stuff on the foreign policy front. It's not a meaningful constraint. And in fact, the president is totally unconstrained by Congress on war-making declarations, all of that. So it's not sufficient to thwart the government on those categories, and then then can be used to thwart oversight and insight into what the government's doing. So on foreign policy, it's very bad. Yeah. And it's just very bad that, again, the president has total leeway, no matter who the president is, to do war.
Yeah, and I will say also, kudos to journalists like Glenn Greenwald who are keeping these kinds of things front of mind.
Yes.
This is a difficult kind of story to get to break through in any mainstream way. There is a world where we have an attentive populace who is attentive specifically to anti-war issues, an anti-war movement in this country that would be furious. This kind of a vote for something that would fully pass, but for the filibuster, a vote for something that is just an oversight position over Ukraine spending. This isn't even a bill that says cut spending to Ukraine, get out of Ukraine.
No.
This is not something that can be easily characterized as Putin puppetry. This is not some boon to Putin. It's just saying that we have spent ungodly amounts of dollars on this war that many people are perceiving as a proxy war that's intended to weaken Russia as opposed to actually advance the interests of the people of Ukraine. And that we want to know where this money is going, especially after we have had 5 failed Pentagon audits in a row, where the Pentagon just announced that, we found another few $1 billion that we had unaccounted for that listened to Ukraine. In that context, you can't get popular political support behind simply an oversight position.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing, pretty demoralizing that we can't even get that. There are millions of American people who think this money could be better spent, or who think, whatever, we should, Ukraine has been invaded and it's important to support them up to a point, but that more needs to be done to foster a diplomatic resolution that will bring about the end of this conflict. But the U.S. Congress is totally uninterested in pressing the administration to do that. They're marching in lockstep virtually.
Yeah.
More Rising right after this.